e-commerce, along with the fact that there's it's getting combined with content. I think that makes some of those consumer shifts easier. So I think it's quite powerful. That being said, I think I have a slightly radical view. I'm actually damn bullish about non-metro, urban. I am very bullish about small town rural because I think to consume packaged, right? Because just fueled by need for greater safety assurance, all that we know. But I think the second is that if you look even 3 to 5 years, you look medium term, the shift we are going to see in disposable income, when you look at that awareness catalyzed by purchasing power, which also means there will be evolution of palette. So some new categories, I think we will see the small towns or rural India sprint it. So I think it's important to always, you always want to serve the leading edge consumer, and so e-commerce is always going to be significant. It's also more margin conducive, but I'm actually quite bullish about mass scale businesses being built on understanding rural and small town India better.
Interesting, because I'll come to you after a little while later to understand how do you see in next 3 to 5 years the story is changing. But let me just switch gear to Shiva with another interesting theme. Shiva, we all are talking about rapid urbanization. We are talking about new food habits, uh, new delivery mechanism. But whatever we are eating is not always healthy, right? It's not nutritious, so to say that. How do you see your firm is putting some guardrails around the nutrition criteria that can really help consumer to pick and choose the right thing, and also for you to guide the industry that this is right from the nutrition perspective? Shiva.
Yeah, Mohit. I mean, I think that we need to move from calories to nutrition. And what I mean by that is, I think as a country, we've made some very significant progress and we have become calorie sufficient as an aggregate. But I think the composition of the calories is what we now need to focus on. I think we need to balance it better. We need to have more protein. Today it's just overloaded in favor of carbs and sugar to an extent, and it is under indexed in protein. So that's really the big challenge or opportunity, the way we see it, to move from calorie sufficiency to nutrition sufficiency. And towards that, of course, we have public commitments. For example, we've said that Unilever is going to double the number of products that offer positive nutrition, as in they're either plant-based or they have macronutrients fortified with minerals, vitamins, etc., etc. So that's something that is a public commitment that we plan to meet. And specifically in the part of the business that I look after, I'm quite happy and proud about one of our recent launches on one of our old brands called Kisan. So we have Kisan peanut butter, which we have recently launched. And as many of you know, it is a fantastic source of protein. And these are exactly the kind of interventions that we want to make to enable the journey from calorie sufficiency to nutrition sufficiency.
Interesting. Shiva, you're talking about a very new line of thinking for consumer, moving from calories to nutrition. Traditionally, when I go and buy any product, I look at the back of the package and try to understand how much calories are we consuming. And that even includes, in certain cases, the obesity-led consumer or the diabetic consumer from a different perspective. Do we see that also changing in the days to come? Companies like yours or any other firm talking about nutrition in terms of labeling?
Yeah, basically there'll be two. Like overload shown three, but
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, from a labeling perspective, of course, there are new standards which are quite progressive, and as an industry, we are in the process of complying with them. But yes, certainly we need to think beyond calories, and for a large part of the packaged food audience, which is urban, it is, I mean, calorie sufficiency is definitely not an issue. So certainly nutrition sufficiency is what matters, and I'm sure people are keen, and we need to guide those choices in terms of, say, how much protein this has or whether this is fortified For example, salt fortified with iodine or many of the other things that we have going. So yeah, certainly it is about guiding those choices, not just on pack, but also on air and in various other ways that we communicate with people.
I think you have given us another guidance for us as a host to take it to the government that they should also now focus on creating an awareness more around the nutrition specifically. Okay, so switching gears and moving to the next line of thinking, Murtaza, given the kind of business you are into, you have tracked
Yeah.
a lot of new products, especially in the food and drink space across the globe, especially in the ASEAN region. How do you see some similarities or differences coming up when it comes to the Indian market? Any thoughts on that, Murtaza?
Yes, thanks, Mohit. At Mintel, we've been tracking new product launches across food and beverage categories in the package space across the globe. I think at the onset of the pandemic, there was a lot of interest across all markets to drive up sort of immunity claims, and that was showing up in every single category that you can possibly imagine. But what we've witnessed over a period of time is that now the claims that brands are making in the ASEAN region as well as the rest of the world, it's moving to more holistic health and well-being. So yes, immunity is important. It will continue to be important, but consumers are looking for more kind of functional health related claims that are more targeted and specific coming through their everyday consumption, like Deepika mentioned earlier, like Shiva mentioned earlier as well. So that's something as a trend that we are seeing playing out across pretty much the globe, including the ASEAN and the India region. Um, what we're seeing in terms of the intensity of this is different across regions. So when we look at markets like Malaysia, Vietnam, there we see a much higher indexing in terms of claims like vitamin and mineral fortified. So to just give you some stats, in markets like Malaysia and Vietnam, more than 7% of all food and drink launches actually have a vitamin and mineral fortified claim against it. Whereas if we benchmark that to India, we are still at about 3.5%. So that's about half of what's happening in those markets. So there are learnings to be taken from those countries in terms of what they're doing, how they're moving these claims, not just in the predominant categories, which was traditionally, dairy or baby food. That's where you would see more of these functional health related claims, but more into everyday categories, tea, as Shiva mentioned, but even snacks or bakery or ready meals. We're seeing more and more functional health related claims play out in these everyday categories. So there is a lot of opportunity for innovation within these mainstream categories to drive further functional health claims. In terms of just some key benefits or digestive health is a trend that we're seeing across prebiotics. I think you mentioned in your opening statement as well. That's becoming very prominent across different categories. But which things like eye health, we're all on the screen. We're spending a lot of time on our mobile devices, on our laptops. We expect to see a lot more innovation on that front. That claim of eye health can actually play out in a lot of different categories. Looking at specific demographics such as kids, children, parents are really concerned about, they can't go out and play. Most of the time they're, on a screen, on a tablet or a mobile phone. So there are lots of inherent opportunities coming from there. So we see that eye health could be one big area of innovation, and as well as a few others in terms of energy is something that we are seeing picking up across different markets. Relaxation is what we anticipate coming in next. So how can we combine sort of functional health claims with some relaxation benefits by the use of ingredients such as ashwagandha or tulsi, or something which is inherently very popular from an Indian context. And there is opportunity even to export these to other markets outside of India if we jump on the trend. So overall, I definitely see a lot of potential in terms of expanding upon this foundation that has been laid around health and wellness and making that more mainstream across different categories. And a lot of innovation in those spaces is expected moving forward.
And do you feel, Murtaza, that we have enough systems and mechanism in place to track the progression of these sectors, the growth of these sectors? I'm sure enterprise like yourself is definitely doing a lot more data crunching and following that. Or is there some mechanism we can recommend to the government to educate our audience? One, the business side, so that they understand this direction, what you're giving is the next level of focus. And for example, investors like Kanan can also see that okay, this is moving the right direction. So data is the god. So how do we really see this data becoming more democratized and people are following those trends and moving in the direction? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. From our research, we found that actually nearly 80% of consumers we spoke to are looking for more understanding in terms of what nutrition is important for them, their everyday sort of consumption. More interest in terms of understanding what micronutrients are able to provide what kinds of benefits. So there's a lot of work to be done from a consumer awareness standpoint. The overall message that the consumer understands is that yes, health is very important and I need to take care of my body and eat the right kind of things. But beyond that, in terms of what specific benefits can be delivered through what kind of nutrients and vitamins is a gap. So it's something that we all need to work on, right from the government to the brands trying to educate the consumers and making this more accessible at the end of the day, as was previously discussed.
Interesting. Thank you so much. I think that was a pretty interesting perspective, Murtaza. So let me just switch to the next interesting line of thinking. We are now going to talk about more on innovation and R&D. As we see that this is not the space wherein we as a country have made significant investment, it happening, but it happening in pockets. And since this is a nascent sector, so we also have to really push more innovation, R&D, especially in the public-private partnership space. So I would now like to go to our panelists. Maybe Deepika, what do you think what we are doing today, or exactly where we need to really push more?
Two big themes really. I think the first one is maybe just summarizing what we said earlier, but how do we really pick up in a big way improving nutrition from everyday food, right? So I think we are still at a few trends that came in probably the last decade, but I think there is more that can happen in terms of big shift. So what innovation can we do that just helps us take up nutrition for India, by providing it on everyday food? I think the second area, which is close to heart for me, is looking at packaging. Even though that's not direct R&D, but because the challenge that we have in foods is you want to provide high quality nutrition with the right shelf life, right? And I think we really need help on how we can be more plastic wise as we do it. So, what are some affordable, biodegradable solutions that especially in the context of us trying to expand distribution footprint, I think some innovation there will really help. Because I think you've got ideas, but they don't allow for mass adoption. Too expensive.
So you're saying precisely we should spend a lot more energy in terms of innovating the packaging.
Yeah, the first is, of course, nutrition on everyday food. And I think the second is that as you're going to see the industry grow, how do you do it more environment friendly? So, what can you do from a packaging standpoint?
Understand. And Shiva, what are your thoughts on this similar dimension?
I mean, R&D is obviously crucial, and we support open innovation. So I think the nature of innovation is such that we can't do everything by ourselves, and there is a lot of joy to be had in collaboration with, whether it's, let's say, the academia or indeed the government. So I think it's a very good thing in principle. So and for example, let's take a business like tea or coffee that we run, and in tea we had run a program in collaboration with the Tea Research Institute in Assam, a pilot program to help grow teas with low or no pesticide usage. Right, so these are, of course, some of the long-term things that need to be done, and they require collaboration. So I think we must pick up these long-term projects on, say, sustainability like this one, and collaborate both with the academics and with the government.
No, I totally agree with you, Shiva. These are, I mean, I must thank you for anchoring such initiative. I know for sure these are long term, and the insights which will emerge out of this will really help and benefit the tea industry overall. And the right academia come corporate partnerships are for sure is the new way of looking at it, and that's how these developed market have evolved over a period of time by investing in research and doing something interesting. Karan, what are your thoughts on this particular aspect? Because you manage a large part of the investment community and represent the right target audience who are at the cusp of innovating a lot more. So, what are your thoughts?
So let me talk a little bit about the kind of trends that we see. Some are kind of fully blown, some are emerging, and what I think could be the role that innovation research could play in those. The first thing, as everybody has said, people want to eat healthier, and they're looking for more protein. They're looking for more nutrient dense foods. I mean, even things like just switching from dairy chocolate to dark chocolate, etc. So there is this very strong search going on for what is a healthier thing for me and my family to consume. And protein is a very big part of that. I think what was earlier just about guys going to the gym to bulk up has now moved into how do I get more protein into my everyday life. Therefore, people are buying protein powders. People are buying, plant-based protein powders and so on. But it's a phenomenally expensive thing. I mean, to have for one person protein powders for a month is something like a 3,000 rupee kind of budget for one person. And a lot of the protein powders are getting imported because that's where you get high quality protein powders, especially if you're talking about plant-based protein powders. That attracts a huge tariff. So I think both from your reach out to government to say why are we taxing something as basic as protein, to saying how do we develop better quality protein from locally available sources of plant-based protein. I think both these are very, very important discussions to have. And I think this will significantly enable democratization of protein. And I think that's an important, agenda that I would put out there. The second trend that we've been seeing fully blown again with COVID, I think, is the move to fresh. We have seen the way the delicious business has scaled up. People don't, and the way that businesses like ID have scaled up. So people want to eat fresher. People want to make sure that these are products which are safe. And there is a lot of concern about the supply chain and the kind of contamination that the food supply chains have in India. So both from managing fresh to enabling safe supply chains, I think there is a job to be done out there. So again, it's both policy and product innovation. I think all of that is going to be required if you want to really enable this big consumer trend. The third trend that I would like to call out, which is perhaps is I think again on the edge or on the edge of the horizon, is really the move to veganism. I'm just seeing more and more of that happening, which is strange in a country which is already very, very vegetarian, where we're talking about protein deficiencies, etc., etc. But I'm still seeing that as happening. And there are alt meats which have been developed, again, phenomenally expensive, 2 to 3 times the cost of real meat, right? And I think we need to have better research going into all of this to understand how to bring down the price and make it much more affordable for everyday consumption by those who want to buy into that as a real lifestyle change.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Karan. I think you made another interesting input, which possibly can go from our side as a host to the government. Is that are we suggesting some policy level interventions when it comes to the safe supply chain network?
Yes, because the fact is, when you look at how consumers are moved, the move to organic, the fear of contamination of pesticides and all kinds of chemicals, right? The fear of antibiotics in the meat that you buy, and those are not, or the shift to organic milk, right? Those are real fears. They're not just concerns of a lunatic fringe, right? And those fears have to be addressed fair and square by both regulatory action and by policy. How do you incentivize people to move to safe supply chains?
Understand. Okay, that's interesting. Now I'll just take 15 seconds pause, and I'm requesting my viewers to please post the questions into the chat box so that we can take this with our panelists. So I'm moving to the next phase of our discussion, and I'll go with each of my panelists. So one thing that comes to our mind would be the way forward of the next 3 to 5 years, which will drive the significant growth. How do you see the future looks like, especially in the food processing space? We are talking about nutrition. We are talking about addressing the problem of malnutrition, moving from calories to protein, talking about safe supply chain, disruption by, or the enablement by, not, I would not say disruption, but the enablement by the e-commerce. So we have touched upon multiple topics. How do you see the future looks like in next 3 to 5 years? Maybe I will go with Shiva first. Shiva, with you, over to you, please.
Yeah, Mohit, sure. I mean, one of the challenges or opportunities in India, we spoke about the composition of our calories and how we eat too much carbs and too little protein. We also don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. And one of the things, on an average, of course, and one of the things is that we have more wastage of fresh produce, like say fruits and vegetables, because we don't process enough, right? And I think that's at the heart of food processing and incentive. The more we process, the less we waste, and the less we waste, the more people can have fruits and vegetables and improve the overall nutrition. So I think that's a large space that is already gathering momentum, and I think it needs to be accelerated and incentivized. We need to process more fruits and vegetables. I mean, from our side, of course, we have our brand Kisan, which was founded on this basis back in the 1930s, and we now work with one of India's large FPOs, or farmer producer organizations, to make sure that yield and quality improves and wastage reduces. So the more we can do this at scale, I think the more beneficial it will be to the overall ecosystem.
Thank you. Interesting perspective, Shiva. Can I request Deepika to further help us build more on this? How do you see the future look like for us as a country?
I mean, so I think my hope is certainly that the short-term future is far more nutritious. So I think the fact that we're able to provide greater nutrition on literally everyday main meal food and deeper down in the country, I think that would be sort of the number one priority. But I think that the other thing that I see that will bring about a shift in landscape is probably the desire for convenience. That's the only other thing I'll call out. So given that we are such a scratch loving country, we're not going to see we won't see a fast rise in ready to eat as quickly, but I think it's leaving the space open for a lot of bridge categories which make everyday home cooking easier. Case in point, the ID point that was made earlier. So I definitely see, when I look at life 3 years down, what a general trade store or a modern trade store will look like. I think that the number of products that we will see on shelf which are more bridge, which are allowing you just to stick to home cooking but make that easier. Me and the generations after me are not grinding chutney at home for sure. So how do you really ensure that some of that becomes easier? That is, I as a marketer and as a business builder, I find quite interesting, because I think that's opening up innovation in food and food processing. Yeah, so innovation on mainstream foods on bridge.
Certainly. Now, I mean, these evening snacks are easily accessible to us on a package. mode. You can simply eat what you traditionally used to eat pre-COVID era, and the raw meat
Still
is
as nutritious though, Mohit. The point is they still
yeah,
ought to be nutritious.
yes. Yes. Kanan, what are your thoughts on this particular long-term going forward perspective?
I think what we are already seeing, and we're going to see a lot more of, is a very aware and very concerned consumer, and a very Google-enabled consumer. I think a lot of us are guilty of tucking away a lot of information in back of pack, assuming that it's safe out there. I think consumers are looking to understand in what they consume whether there are any nasties in the product. And I think they will expect from us marketers, us brand owners, a high level of transparency. And they'll hold us to those high standards. And therefore, increasing transparency of what we put in the product is, I think, going to be super important. The second piece, and I think this was mentioned earlier, consumers also becoming a lot more aware about sustainability and what we're doing to the planet. They're still not walking away from brands which are, harming the planet, but I think over time they will start doing that. So both from our own concerns about what we're doing for the planet, but also from a point of view of winning customer love, I think it's important to think about sustainability and think about how to create packaging and supply chain which are more planet friendly.
Thank you, Karan. I think you talked about a pretty interesting subject of sustainability, which is definitely becoming the new norm for all of us. As corporate enterprise, we all are getting geared towards that. And as a consumer, the moment this goes in the mind of the consumer, then the real pressure will come on us as an enterprise to deliver, and government to also bring some compliances around that. So with this, let me just
Sorry,
go.
Mohit, I don't think it should be only about compliances. I think there is a big on cost of moving to more sustainable packaging. We're talking about 50 to 75% more cost.
Wow.
And especially when it comes to food as a part of total cost is actually significant. I mean, packaging as a part of cost is quite significant. And therefore, you're going to pass on that cost to consumers, etc., which is not a great thing also. So I think, again, it's about the government thinking it through and saying, what's a way to manage this transition to more sustainable packaging? And how do we help consumers and brands also transit to that rather than only just having regulation in place?
Interesting. Murtaza, can I just draw your attention and help us to think through how do you see the systems changing, the numbers changing, especially in terms of the growth, some sort of a indicative thoughts around that?
Yeah, from what we've seen is there's expected to be significant growth in sort of high fiber claims. So just like we're seeing a big wave of protein at the moment, consumer awareness on fiber is also rapidly increasing. So we've already seen that in more mature markets, and we expect that to soon come in the ASEAN region and India as well. So that's one area to look out for. And then more specific sort of functional health claims, which are more targeted, such as heart health, for example, bone health, and having specific products for specific target demographics. So diabetes, for example, there's a huge section of the population that are diabetic, and there is a need for products to be created for that segment. So we expect and anticipate to see a lot more specialized targeted products for specific consumer cohorts that are coming up in different areas. That's from a consumer standpoint. I completely agree with Kanan as well in terms of sustainability. I think better for you is what is now, but the future will be better for us. And brands will have to think through in terms of how we're trying to move that scale. There is a conundrum. It does have an impact on costs. So I completely understand, but there needs to be, and that's where we need to all work together along with the government to create an ecosystem, to create the right kind of structures in place so that we can move towards a more sustainable future. But from a consumer standpoint, research that we did in the US market showed us that nearly half of the population thinks that sustainably sourced food products are inherently a lot more healthier. So that's the consumer understanding. So over a period of time, this will enable consumers to be willing to pay a little bit more in terms of going forward for sustainably sourced food and drink products. But there still is a significant gap that needs to be bridged. And that's what we expect to see over the next 5 years or so.
I couldn't agree more with this. The traceability of what we eat right from the day of origin is also going to become a new norm. And what Karan is saying, so potentially this will also add up to a cost. When we are going to trace the origin from the origin, whatever we are consuming, and adding more data layers to this. I know there are a lot of pilot projects which are happening in the country from the government side also, but this is just the beginning in my view, and we are on the right track. So I'm really happy and thankful to each of my panelists. I think we touched upon quite array of pointers and suggestions, which will possibly go as an input to the government and also for the members who are viewing us right now on the call. So let me just switch gear and move to the last segment of our session, which is the Q&A. Rika, can I invite you back to help us take through the Q&A with our panelists and the members on the call, please?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think it was a fascinating conversation, and I think I can see a whole host of questions coming up. So I am going to start shooting them off. So the first question is actually for Deepika and Shiva. How do you see the market for premium health product offerings like functional foods, nutraceuticals, which can be expensive but profitable? However, companies like yourselves, are you also focusing in that area? So maybe just some thoughts around that. Deepika, you want to go first?
Yeah, so I think we're very keen to experiment with some of these future bets. I think in the short term horizon, they will not make for probably large scale, is our view, but very important to be working on Horizon 3 right now. So I think, without commenting on specifics, I think some of the future spaces, protein, etc., that we spoke about earlier on the call are definite interest areas. Yeah, so I think in a way we need to look at the business both as what we will build, for fast scale and what we are seeding in, which may be a bit more top end now, but we do expect with some of the trends, like even Kanan was mentioning earlier, that we need to be trying, testing, present, MVPing out, so that we're ready for when they catch scale.
Shiva, any comments from you?
I mean, functional foods is a clear priority for as it indeed should be for all food and beverage companies. And while future plans are what they may be, the most exciting immediate thing for us is, of course, the acquisition of Horlicks that we've had. And we are very excited about the opportunity that it provides to bring in the wonderful functional nutrition products that come from that stable and give it the scale and take it to more people. So that is the immediate priority for us on functional food.
Great, thank you so much. The next question is for Kanan. When it comes to startups, they don't have large budgets, but how are you seeing some of the successful startups actually innovate with products which are relevant for consumers, and any learnings you want to share? Because I'm sure there are loads of startups actually right now watching this event. So it'll be great to get your learnings from some of the successful startups that you've seen.
So, as I said, one of the things that startups are really relying on to scale up is the digital access to consumers, both in terms of engaging with them and also in converting that engagement to business. And that has been clearly enabling scale and enabling scale with capital efficiency. So that's just the one part of it. Now that doesn't walk away that doesn't help if you don't have a great brand or great insights. So I think above all, you need to be finding real solutions for real issues. I think the big thing which is happening with digital access is that earlier we used to talk about these very large monolithic consumer segments. We now are breaking up segments into smaller and smaller units, and therefore we are looking at what traditionally would have called sub-segments and saying to what extent are they underserved, and can I as a startup start looking at underserved segments and then looking at how to get good at doing that. So that's another way of thinking about building a business. Don't think of large homogeneous segments. Think of how to break down that homogeneity into underserved pieces. I mean, let me give you an example. Yoga Bar is a business that I've been associated with for some time. And they came to the market and said, look, you know what, people want to snack and there is no healthy snacking. So they launched snack bars. And that enabled them to build a brand around healthy eating. They moved from there into breakfast. They launched muesli, right? And really, they broke the issue of, can a really healthy product be also tasty? So they came in with a dark chocolate muesli. And unlike all the other mueslis in the market, this is a seriously good for you muesli. It's got lots of nuts, seeds, etc. And also with the dark chocolate, it's deeply addictive. I can tell you that, right? So they've really gone into saying, okay, there is a whole lot of people who want convenient breakfast foods, and what is available out there is just not as healthy as people want. So can I serve them? Okay. They're not gone into nut butters and doing very well out there. And again, they brought in a whole range of flavors, etc., etc. And again, talking about protein and taste and all of that, and really doing very well out there. So they are saying there's a bunch of people who want to eat healthier, and the mass market offerings out there aren't as healthy as the consumer wants it to be, and they're serving that consumer. Okay, so that's another way to think about how to break into the market. Another thing is to think about new product formats. We've just invested in a business which is into nutraceuticals called Wellbeing. And India is not a large nutraceuticals market because people want to eat, only want to swallow pills and capsules if a doctor prescribes it, right? But here they're trying to see how to make supplements into more fun. So they launch a range of effervescent tablets. So drop a tablet into a glass of water, fizzes for a minute or two, and then you drink it up. They launched melts. So little strips, put it on your tongue, and within a few seconds, it melts. And you got a dose of vitamin D or vitamin B. They got probiotics, etc., etc., a whole range of melts. So they're looking for how to, engage people with supplements in a way that consumers find engaging, not in the traditional thing of buy a bottle, take out a capsule, etc., etc. So I would say these are some of the ways that people are building interesting businesses out there.
Sure. I think there's a question for Mohit. Are there any organic functional food or brands that have become mainstream?
Yes, so the simple answer is yes. As you can see, the recently launched PLI scheme by Ministry of Food Processing has a clear mention in this segment. I think for the first time, they have beautifully called out the product, the new age product, as a focus segment for you to invest and grow your enterprise. So there's a lot happening in this space. Back to Rinka.
Right. Okay. There is a question from Bangalore. What are your thoughts on clean label vegan meat? As a vegan, I find it hard that there is really no company that's making that. Anyone can take this question, really. Murtaza, you want to just talk about that?
Sorry, Rinka, can you repeat the question? I missed it.
Yeah, I said, what are your thoughts on clean label vegan meat? As a vegan, I find it hard that there is no company really making that. So any thoughts around how vegan meat would probably take sort of more center stage in India?
It's coming soon, I can tell you that. There's a lot happening in plant-based alternative meats. Lots of different investment is happening in that segment. We've already seen certain companies become very, very big at it, Impossible Meats and the likes from the Western world. But I'm fairly confident that over the next 3 years, we're going to see a lot of innovation in this space. We've already started seeing companies do this in India as well.
Yeah. I think we've lost him. Yeah, and I think just to answer,
we're not very
Sorry,
far
go ahead.
from a world where actually, it's going to be difficult to distinguish between the texture of real meat and sort of plant-based meat. It's not too far away. We will get to that stage. And with the kind of investments being poured into this segment, there will be clean label vegan meat available really soon.
Yeah. And also, I think I would urge for some of you, the listeners, to come in into our session on functional ingredients. And when we talk about that, we will be talking about alternate proteins. We will be talking about how do you ensure that it's not just about, mimicking what's happening in the US or Europe. It is actually about creating plant-based alternatives for the Indian segment, and that's going to be more democratized than saying it's a very premium offering. So I think I would really urge for a lot of you to come and listen into that. There's a question from Bangalore for Mr. Kannan saying, any guidance on what could be the possible innovation opportunity for addressing affordable nutrition gap in India? And as you know, 50% of global minerals and nutrition deficiency is in India. So any thoughts around that?
I think it's a big challenge right now, affordable nutrition, because I think the question is, what is affordable, right? What we are seeing is clearly people are willing to pay a premium for more nutrient-dense products, right? And the fact is that, if you are really trying to get to the bottom of the pyramid, today it's a competitive market out there. You are putting in stuff out there which is not necessarily very good from a nutrition standpoint. And if you want to replace that with better quality ingredients, there is a premium to be paid. So I would think that you need to be prepared to pay more if you want better nutrition. As I said earlier, the government needs to also think through what it can do to reduce the price of better quality nutrients. We talked about protein, etc. And I think this cannot just be left to the business. I think the government also needs to understand that it has got to partner with business to be enabling reduction of costs.
Right. I think, and Shiva, Deepika, anything you want to add in the space of affordable nutrition? How do we see more innovation in that space? How do you ensure that it's, like you said, Deepika, how do you make sure there's much more accessibility to nutrition? Any further thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I share, I share passion to be able to do it. And I think exactly like Kanan said, I think the real challenge we're facing is to be able to make costs work. I think, so I think to the point we were making on R&D and innovation, and especially because it's in foods categories, just the cost of the surround beyond the ingredients of the supply chain gets really prohibitive. So I'd say it's a real challenge, but equally, I think that's why it's an opportunity for how we innovate. I think that's where it is. So I think the heart of it is maybe it's going to be a mix of us even trying a few different formats, etc., which are going to allow for some of this consumption to go deeper down faster. Yeah, so share the passion. No great. I can't say made great headway so far, but on it.
Yep, awesome. Okay, so the next question is again for you, actually. What are your views on the impact of inflation on innovation and products in packaged foods? Do you see any people? Do you see people may move to simpler foods? I guess I think that's the question.
Yeah, I think before I came here, I only did personal care in Unilever. So I think the margin stress that foods businesses bring. I'm quite alive to that. So, look, it's a real challenge. I think where, especially right now, it is super inflationary, and where, it's not that we want to pass the cost to the consumer, but I think we also can't hold bulk of them internally. So I think we're having a pretty difficult time and focusing a lot on making everything else work harder so that consumer prices, is affected to really the minimum possible. So there's a real challenge on core categories and ensuring that their affordability continues. Innovation by contrast, especially some of the more top end consumer or the leading edge consumer innovation, we see less struggle in because you're starting with value addition and therefore the ability to to deliver good quality product to an underserved consumer, like Kanan mentioned earlier. So innovation, I see less stress in, but core categories to ensure they are still accessible to consumers is where we're working hard.
Sure. Great, thank you. I think there's a question, Mohit, for you, but and I'd leave it to others as well to take it on. Is do you see the importance and role of technology, and it's really IoT, artificial intelligence and machine learning in the future in the food industry? So, any thoughts around that? This is for you, Mohit, but it could be any one of you answering that as well.
Yes, so IoT definitely is the new norm, not only in the food, but in any manufacturing layout as we speak, because we have learned the hard way that because of COVID, we simply cannot shut down our facilities. Hence, whatever is getting think through the new design, IoT will take the new norm, and AI and ML are also becoming a very common thing, especially government laying the frameworks around that, and enterprise using this to crunch and analyze data. And maybe Murtaza can also throw some light further on this because of the experience he has.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of work happening in this space. So using technology to improve efficiencies and to sort of future-proof and thinking of ways in which you can open up more avenues, whether it's in terms of accessibility or whether it's in terms of finding different ways in which we can get the ecosystems to work to. There's a lot of data out there. So essentially, we're using these technology to assimilate. So even at Mintel, we're now using artificial intelligence and machine learning to help us synthesize all of these data sets from different sources to create meaningful insights for our clients. So I think it's about using these technologies to help us navigate through all of these different data sets that are out there that are available and converting that into meaningful insights. And I'm sure organizations across different industries will be using this to their advantage to improve efficiencies.
Absolutely. And I think, again, to some of the listeners, please do visit the stalls or the booths on where there are companies presenting about using AI to generate consumer insights and so on. So just do visit some of these booths and get more insights. I think there are a lot more questions on nutrition. I think most of it has been answered, so I'm not going to be stressing on that. And we'll probably leave one last question. It's really about millet processing. And I think this came out in the inaugural session as well. And I think there is a big push from the Ministry of Food Processing, from FSSAI, on saying how do we promote better utilization and production of millets as well, and millet-based products, whether it's about value-added products or it's base products of millets. And we know it's a sustainable crop. We know it's a healthier product. And I think from the government side, there is a lot of push towards millet processing. I'd love to hear Deepika, Shiva, and Kanan, your views on this in terms of how do we drive more growth in this space.
I mean, I think that overall, everything is right about millet, right? Whether you look at the impact it has on agriculture, whether you look at it from a nutrition standpoint. So I think it's just all green ticks. I think this is a place where generally from an industry standpoint, there is a job to be done on making the right products available on shelf. There's the tip of the iceberg stuff, which is what we're doing, let's say, with brands like Soulful. But I think there is a mass India millet consumption, and you're also seeing millets travel. But I think there is innovation that can be done to make millets more easy to use for consumer. That's certainly something we're very fascinated about. So I think with the right innovation, it is something that consumers will find it easy to adopt to. There is I think where we can do a lot more work is how do you drive the behavior shift faster. So I think while there is already work that's happening, with the year of ancient millets, etc., I think there's a lot more that can be done, to make millets more mainstream, more everyday, and drive up penetration of millet in the Indian household.
Yeah, and just to add to what you're saying, I think some of the brands like Soulful you mentioned, and I think I've been personally very fascinated by how they've taken ragi, which was a ingredient which nobody would like to consume, into a format which is very havable, right? You suddenly convert it into a breakfast cereal. It is just kids are having today choco pops made with ragi or whatever. So I think you're just making access with formats which are consumer relevant, and I think that is where this is truly fascinating for me as well. Yeah, Shiva, Kanan, would be happy to hear you.
I agree with what both of you are saying, Deepika and Prinka, because one of our companies is Slurp Farm, and they're looking at young kids and how to provide healthy choices that mothers will not have a struggle giving to young kids. And they come up with millet-based dosa mixes, pancake mixes. They now have a cake mix which is maida free and is based on millets. So there's a whole bunch of products that they have launched out there, which are really relying on the nutrition profile of millets. And I think the key has been, how do you crack the taste conundrum? How do you make it really tasty while being very, very nutritious? And I think they are very focused on that. And with that focus, they have been able to crack that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to add an interesting perspective, especially we are talking about millets. And if you recall, in March, Honorable Prime Minister in the General Assembly declared that India is leading along with 70 nations that 2023 will be the International Year of Millets. You see, the PLI scheme of MOFP is categorically talking about millets. So this is the space to operate in for the industry as well as for the consumer to take switches.
Absolutely. And I think, and the question on schemes available, and I think based on the last session's conversations as well, and I think this is going to be something that people need to watch out the space for, because there will be a lot more of this. There will be a lot more of this coming from the government side. And I think the more we do here, the more we innovate in this space is absolutely the right thing to do. So I'm going to, I think we're done with most of the questions. Any other closing comments, from all of you?
I'd like to take a first step. Yeah, I think it's certainly quite an enriching spectrum of conversations we have, from processed food to nutrition, moving from calories to nutrition, talking about the new age delivery mechanism, moving to a protein-based, protein-rich diet. So we have definitely covered up a lot of interesting suggestions over the call. And I must thank all my panelists, Vicky, Rinka, especially you, for helping us wave through this whole steps. I think it's an interesting session. Thank you so much for all the help and interesting inputs.
Great. Any other comments?
Well, I've been in the FMCG industry for a long while. And years back, we used to, the big headache used to be, how do you get Indians to switch to packaged food? I think we have gone well beyond that. I think we are now talking about, many more evolved kind of, consumer angles. We're talking about nutrition. We're talking about freshness. We're talking about sustainability. And I think we just moved to a completely different phase of the development of the food industry in India.
Absolutely. Shiva?
Nothing beyond what we've already spoken. It's a wonderful, lively discussion. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Murtaza, anything else from your side?
No, just a thank you to all the panelists and yourself, Rinka. It's a really insightful discussion. Privileged to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for your time. And I know all of you have very busy schedules, but to take that time out and, almost talk to, I think, more than 3,000 listeners who are listening into you. And I think it's a great motivation coming from, people like you who've spent so many years in the industry. You've seen this industry grow. And like Kanan, you said, I think the way I see it as well is actually right now it's a very, very nice inflection point right now, actually, for the food industry, where we're really trying to see, and we're seeing great growth in the industry coming. A lot of it is going to come from health and nutrition. And I think we're all in the right space in there. I think the effort that we all need to collaboratively work together to be able to push this is going to be super critical as well. So thank you very much, all of you, for your time and absolutely fantastic insights. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
See you then.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.